Hello everyone. I am Darkness and welcome back to the realm and world of BioShock Infinite, the DLC, Burial at Sea or Burial, whichever one you want to go with. Part 2. Actually, episode 2, I shouldn't say part because I split it up into parts. This would actually be part 4 of it. Thank you so much for joining me. I am going to be ashamed when I open this up and I see how long it's been. It's been a long time since I played this game. I know it's been a while. I know it has. But, thank you guys so much for joining me. It is a live stream that I'm doing it as, but I'm stripping down everything to the bare minimals and whatnot. So you guys later that can't join me during the live stream can join me later and watch it as finally I end out this series. Now I'm gonna hit continue. Hopefully it won't show you, thank God. Because I believe the last time I picked it up was a year and some months ago. Maybe a year and 4 months.
No cause for alarm. Well stated. So, it's begun.
The Kashmir's all blown to hell. If Ryan didn't know we were back before, I'm sure now he's got the message.
What do you want with this one?
If anybody's got the line on the ace, it's her. Find out what she knows. But no quackery. She's no good to us with a halo and a set of wings.
I get started as soon as the claw form wears off.
I
See her as too tough.
I remember where we are. They're about to start trying to get the line for the ace in the hole out of her. But there's a few issues with that. So I'm going to actually go along and explain a few things as this unfolds, just in case it's been so long that I don't remember if I explained it, or that if you remember, or if I...
Where's the ace in the hole?
What? What?
Where's the ace in the hole?
I don't know what you're talking about. Look, we had a deal.
Where is the ace in the hole?
I told you.
Sodium thiopental. Are you familiar? No. Truth serum. Unpredictable stuff. Too little, nothing.
I have
Too
nothing
much.
to tell
The
you.
subject
I don't
is
even know what an ace in the hole is. Ah!
I'm still playing with the dosage.
There's a reason that she's saying, I don't know. Oof, in this cutscene.
This world values children, not childhood. There's a profit to be made, and men who make it.
Oh boy.
Folks say it's only a matter of time till Atlas's entire mob comes out waving the white flag.
She's carrying Daddy's banner about right now, but I'll explain that a little later.
2 weeks.
What?
You've been down 2 weeks, love. Feckin' doctors. Better off hiring a million monkeys.
Our deal was to get you out of prison. What, did you expect me to win your war for you too?
I'd tend to your own knitting if I were you. Now, darling, being that you were Su Chong's lab assistant and all, why not tell me where me ace in the hole went to?
I don't know what
As I said, I'm no doctor. But that doesn't mean I don't find the field fascinating. I keep up on all the medical journals and the like.
I hope you have someone to help you with all the big words.
You know what part of the brain free will comes from? Stubbornness? The prefrontal lobe. Now, I think it's fair to say you're a bit of a stubborn one, are you not? A man named Steinman taught me this. He's a bit of a lunatic, but a fine surgeon. He calls this little trick a transorbital lobotomy. Take hold of her, lads.
You're wasting your
Now,
time.
If you won't remain still, I can't be held responsible for what comes next. Here we go.
Oh boy.
You feel that? I'm moving the pick across your eyeball, still now, and resting it on your skull. There's about a bit over 1/4 of an inch of bone between the pick and your prefrontal lobe. And that's where this little fella comes in.
I don't...
It was just a wee tap. But I don't expect it'll take more than a few of those to reach the meat. And then we might find you a bit less the mule. Where's me ace in the hole?
I don't know.
You know what else rests in the lobe? Creativity. Individuality. Personality. In short, what makes you, you.
That crackling sound.
I'm just about through now. Last chance, pet. Where is the ace in the hole?
Or what? What, you'll put a hole in my head and take away my memories? You want to make me forget all this? You want to make me not care anymore? Go ahead. You'll be doing me a favor.
Oh! Bring in the monster! You're a regular hero, ain't you? Can't risk ripping the only part of you that's worth a damn. Well, there's more than one way to fry an egg. Now, little one, are you familiar with the term transorbital lobotomy?
Please let her go!
That's Sally.
All I need to is insert this pick into your eye.
Please, I don't know
A
anything!
few taps with me hammer.
I don't know anything!
To show by example.
Please! Please don't! I don't know anything! I don't know! Please!
She honestly doesn't know.
Shh, it's okay. It's okay. Listen, it's okay.
I can't tell him what I don't know.
Or does she?
Where are we?
You saw all the doors. And what's behind all the doors?
The ace in the hole. It's here.
Yes.
But I don't remember this place.
You've never been here.
Then how would
The
it...
memories you lost, they weren't just of the past. You saw behind all the doors.
Even the ones into the future. This is where I'm going.
If you want.
I don't like it here.
It's a bad place.
He's never gonna let me go, is he? Even if I bring him the ace. Then why am I here? How if I was so smart? If I saw so much, why just send myself to the slaughter?
For Sally.
No, one day he will just rip her open and tear out her atom. All of this for nothing. Why did I do it? Why?
You have to decide.
Decide what?
To take a leap of faith. I can't tell you what you were thinking because you don't remember. But you chose to come. There. In that room.
The ace. I don't know what to do, Booker. Booker? Booker! No, please. Please just don't leave me here! Booker!
Sally. Not a little sister.
Suchong's clinic! It's at Suchong's clinic.
That's a bit convenient now. Ryan's got every turret in the place tuned to me and me men's genetic code. We'd be torn to shreds before we got 10 feet.
That's right. Which is why I'm gonna do it for you. You okay with that?
Get me the ace, I'll wrap the brat in a silk ribbon. Bag her and bring her to my bathysphere.
Oof. She was telling the truth. What Booker, or her memory was, Booker was trying to tell her was that, and I'll say it after this.
One of the lads will show you how to get inside. We'll be waiting for you where you come out. Shake a leg now. The Lord hates a laggard.
Okay, find the ace in the hole. That's what we're doing right now. Now, you're going to have to forgive me. I'm going to have to remember some of the mechanics of actually playing the game as we go along. But here's the long and short you need to know. She was not lying when she just said that. There's a little bit of truth to the exact thing that she just was trying to say. She didn't remember. Or did she? Booker, the hallucination in this, has always been the part of her that it's kind of like her forgotten part of being able to see behind the doors. Don't remember what I mentioned in the other videos, but remember, she had to have the Lutessas help to get back here because she found her own dead body. She cannot go back to a place she's already died. The same reason the Lutessas yearn to go back to where they came from, but they cannot go back to a place they've already been dead and they were killed for what they knew. So the Lutessas are interloping all over the place because their particular homes that they came from, they can't go back to those exact places. They've already died there. So Elizabeth is now okay. Exposition, and then we'll get to actually playing the game. So there's one Elizabeth left. Why is there one Elizabeth left? Because at the very end of the game of BioShock Infinite, there is still one Booker left. One Booker with one Elizabeth still in the crib. Which means that the Elizabeth that's left has put it all together. She sees behind all the doors. She understands if there's a Booker and an Elizabeth baby left, that there is also still a Comstock left. There's one entity of all of them that kind of got messed up after trying to drown Booker/Comstock at the baptism. Alright? So, in part 1, what does she do? What does she do? She tries to go track down where the last Comstock must be, because if there is another Booker, that means there is another chance for one more Comstock in all of the universes to exist. Alright? Which means there was another chance for an adult Elizabeth and a baby Elizabeth, Booker's baby, to exist. She finds it. She finds it and tries to convince Comstock to stop. She tries to change those events. We're dealing with the same Elizabeth from BioShock Infinite. It's all the same. It's all the exact same Elizabeth. Don't forget this. It's the same Elizabeth that all of a sudden in the flashback in episode 1 of Burial at Sea. That one is trying to convince Comstock to stop what she's doing at the other side from Comstock's point of view with the Lutessas. What ends up happening? Well, when she's put it all together, she finds the other Booker. She finds the other Comstock. She finds the other baby Anna / grows up to be Elizabeth. She finds all of these things. But even in her own meddling, maybe she's the one that caused the struggle to go differently. Who knows? Baby Anna is killed because instead of the pinky being cut off, the head is. So instead, she goes back to Punish, where she finds out the last Comstock went to. Why did the timeline diverge? Why was there one that was just an outlier? Her own influence in the timeline made there was one special Comstock that was unlike the rest of them. The special Booker that survived, that was the only timeline in which he wasn't drowned. The one Comstock that survived, in which the one timeline, in the one instance in where if there's a Booker that survived, there had to be also the flip side of a Comstock that survived. There's only one of everyone left, and the one Anna that's left as a baby just got nixed because possibly of Elizabeth's own interfering. So now we're at episode 1, where she goes back to go punish the last Comstock because that Comstock doesn't want to remember the shit he just did. He decides to ask the Lutessas to go open up a new tear for him and go to a place where an Anna or an Elizabeth never existed. Where did it go? Well, comes over here to Rapture. Elizabeth decides why it's the curt way she's talked to him. That's why we start off the way we are. That's why it starts off so she knows. That's why she's so vague. She knows she's actually speaking to Comstock. Well, what happens to you when you actually go and you're interloping between timelines, as we learned in Infinite? The nosebleed starts happening because you're superimposing yourself in a timeline you don't belong in, and many times when you're dragged through that, the nosebleeds are happening because your brain is forgetting. the Lutesses took time. The male Lutess version had to take time because he forgot a lot of the things. His memory was it was all shattered. So we get a lot of flashbacks that tell us that pretty much we are looking at not Booker DeWitt when we're playing episode 1. We are looking at the last Comstock because he's having flashes from Comstock's point of view. So Booker, sadly, is living in a reality where his daughter's head was cut off and we just don't know what happened to him. He's not explained. He's living in a reality where baby Anna, he makes some of the same mistakes. He makes the same deal, except for now, there is a Booker who has a daughter with no head. That's what happened to that version of Booker. Great. That's nice and sad. She's pissed enough that she uses Sally as bait. In every version, it seems, of every single time that there's any part of this family involved in anything, they all make the same mistake, which is they make a mistake and they try to make up for it. She used Sally as bait because this Booker that was in episode 1 is also Comstock, who wanted a child and is also the Booker who would have, if he had a child of his own, would have been irresponsible. Going back to the facade of being Booker and forgetting he was Comstock, he does the exact same thing he did with his own daughter. He goes off and gambles, and while gambling, loses Sally, his adoptive daughter. He makes the last Comstock remember he is actually Comstock by forcing him to go find Sally, his adoptive daughter, who he lost in the same way the other Bookers have lost Anna before and sold Anna off. Because he gambled, he lost all of his money, he had a way out, he sold his own daughter, tried to retcon the bet, didn't work, he loses his daughter. By trying to grab her out of the vent, he remembers he is actually Comstock, and when the doll's head falls down, he remembers that as Comstock, he killed Anna on accident, while the Elizabeth, the last one left, was standing right next to him saying, "Stop what you're doing," trying to change what happened. Elizabeth, as punishment, makes him see Sally go through the same thing to be like, hey, you remember, now you're gonna die. And Booker / Comstock, the last Comstock, is killed by Big Daddy. Now we're in episode 2, where she's back for a reason. We're not quite sure why she's back until we're told and she sees her own body. Now we get glimpses of, she has a flashback kind of the Lutesses bringing her to the world of BioShock, the original one. But she can't see behind all the doors anymore. She superimposed herself down to one entity because she did the thing the Lutesses refused to do so they could be interlopers. The Lutesses stopped bouncing between worlds, the two worlds they couldn't go back to, the ones they came from, in which they were executed and died. They could not return to those. She could not, with all of her power, return to a place where that entity version of herself had died, which was this version of BioShock with Andrew Ryan the day before in the New Year's Eve party, before all the riots, all that stuff. She couldn't bring herself back to the timeline where she had died. She needed the Lutesses' help, who tried to tell her she loses everything if she does this, and is it really worth it? But the Lutesses are sitting there kind of giving her a hint of the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as if she's making the same mistakes as Daddy, which if you think about it, she kind of is. She has regret and remorse because she used Sally as an example. But by using Sally as an example, the Elizabeth that just leaves and just goes on her merry way to go to try to be in France, which might be a real depiction of what she did, or might be her having a dream. The one that wants to go to Paris cannot forget that she left Sally for dead to show Comstock a lesson. She left Sally for dead in that vent. When she stopped Booker / Comstock from pulling her back out of the vent, she killed Sally on accident. She killed Sally. So, out of remorse, she's coming back to fix it. But she doesn't know exactly how to fix it because she cannot see behind the doors. And when she's questioning herself on why Booker is even talking to her when Booker's lying next to her dead / Comstock, It's the part of her that remembers some of the parts behind the doors, and she finds her own dead body, remembers the conversation, and remembers she is just a normal human being. What can she do? It's Booker, her imagination of Booker, which actually is the fragmented memory of what she saw behind all the doors, all the possibilities, and behind the possibilities she has come back to. Now we have to remember, why can't she just remember it as a whole of what to do as instructions? Well, the future, as we saw from BioShock Infinite, has constants and variables and is very fragmented. It's extremely fragmented. So because of that fragmentation, she is trying her best to remember. But he just said in that context right there, Booker said, you decide. Why she had forgotten, she was searching her memory for all those fragments, for what in the past of all of those doors and sights into the past, present, future. She kept looking to the past and present to what might happen and where the ace in the hole was. She did not know. It took her vision of Booker, her vision of her memories of Beyond the Doors to remind her. She can't look to the past or present. Those don't have the answers. She has to look to her future of those doors to find out the reason of where the ace is and why she ever came back. But she's scared because now she knows, looking to the future, what her future holds is she does know something, but she also knows there is no way in all those fragments and all those memories that she might have, she does not see the one where she lives. So why? Why would she come back and do all this if she knows, even being tortured, even remembering the future, even remembering where the ace in the hole is, to go find Dr. Suchong, even if she remembers all these things, trying to save Sally, why go and get herself killed because she knows that she's going to be betrayed by Atlas/Fontaine? She knows she will be betrayed. Why go through all that trouble if she's going to get killed, and for all she can remember, after he gets what he wants, he's gonna just turn around. Fontaine will turn around and kill Sally. But then she has a flashback of a normal Sally. She has a flashback, or a flash forward, actually. A flashback because she remembers her memories of the future. She remembers that there is a future in which Sally is safe. And Booker reminds her it's her decision whether to strive for the future in which she makes a decision somewhere along the way where Sally is saved, knowing that she does not know a future or of any possible future of all those fragments, that she can live through it. Get it? So she remembers seeing behind all the doors, but every door of the future she can try to remember this very second right now. She's getting fragments of, in all the maybe dozen of choices she just remembered, they all lead to one point. That one room that Booker just showed her, that Booker disappeared because Booker said, I can't tell you what you don't know. So when she tries to look at the future into that room, Booker has to leave. Booker is telling her what she knows, and she does not know exactly what's there. But from what she can see, it is a convergence of futures in where Sally is a human being, possibly saved, yet she is dead. Elizabeth is no more. Now she must trek forward, knowing that most likely, no matter how she tries to go about this, she will die. But she had a reason to come back. As Booker said, you chose to do this. She's saying, I'm leading myself into slaughter. Booker, her memory of seeing behind the doors is telling her, you didn't lead yourself to slaughter just to die. If you led yourself to slaughter, it was for penance, and there was a reason. You just can't remember all the futures that would tell you why you would sacrifice yourself and how Sally would live. But there is one. You've got to go find it now. Now it's your choice. That's what he pretty much just said. So now she finally decides, and all of that, she finally decides to go ahead, go through with it, and go ahead and tell Atlas, or Fontaine, technically. whichever one. She goes ahead to tell him she remembers that it's Suchong. Suchong has the ace in the hole. She remembers that part. That little office is actually a table that's near Suchong. But in the background of that office, she also does see part of her future, which is her death. And near that, the hand reaching to her is a normal human Sally. She has the pieces. She doesn't know how to put them together. So now we are back in this very confusing situation where she does not know behind all the doors, but she does know there is a future where in the timeline that she has now made, by the way, she made a new timeline. Remember this as we get to the end, because I'm going to have to explain that. She made a new timeline by even doing this in the first place, because without her doing this, there's no Lutez particle. There's no going to Fontaine/Atlas's office and putting it at the most structurally integral part to be able to lift it from the bottom of the sea to rejoin the rest of Rapture. There's none of that. Without her coming back and getting herself squished down to a normal human being instead of being beyond the reach of time and space, she started the timeline that starts at this very moment. BioShock, the original game. Now she's got to figure out what to do about the rest of it, because she doesn't know. So see, there are still multiple timelines, but she is only playing her last timeline. She is literally... There are other timelines where possibly Fontaine didn't come back up, because there can only now be one Elizabeth. Elizabeth died and came back to this timeline. She is now forced there to be one point of divergence, just like she forced one point of divergence for Booker by drowning Booker at the baptism, which only left one other thing after she looked through all the doors. She drowned Booker at the baptism, which killed off all the Bookers except for the one that would erase her own existence to let her kill Booker. Are we there yet? Are we all good? Since she erased all the Bookers, she did not kill the one version of Booker that had to still exist somewhere for her to ever have existed in the first place to kill Booker at the baptism. So there is one Elizabeth that's supernatural around. There is one normal baby Anna around. There's one Booker that lives in one timeline, and there's one Booker that lives in the other that still survives. She figures it all out. She kills the Comstock Booker. She does it at Sally's expense, feels guilt, actually has to quantumly suppress herself down into being a normal human being, and now she's forced a timeline, just like she did before, of forcing a timeline of erasing all the Comstocks. She's forced a timeline where there was a possibility that she could have actually had a ton of different Bioshocks going on, a ton of different ways. No, she's just now forced one where there is only one Elizabeth left. That's why she's really, really scared. Because if she screws this up, Sally does not live, and that one future she sees, out of all the different ones that she can create, she cannot have different futures here. There are no different futures. There's only one until the point she now dies. She has to get it right or Sally dies. Get it? She's petrified. She came back to be slaughtered. She can't go back and do it again. She has none of her powers. She knows that there are splintering timelines. She knows everything could go haywire. But she does know there is one chain of events that she can cause that will probably still lead to her death. But her penance of making Sally suffer to teach Comstock a lesson will be changed. And Sally will be safe. Oof. Now we've just got to go find Suchong. It is a royal cluster to try to put it all together all the time.
I tell you, William, it's getting so the foxes are afraid of the hens. If Fink was going to hire a bunch of goons to keep an eye on the handymen, he should have found some with less yellow in the belly. Now they're hiding away from Tin Man invalids in their precious little guard room.
Okay.
If
Get
you
me to
need
hit
to get
that.
in there on your shift, the code is 2847.
2847, we already used that code, I believe, in the last one I did. Alright. Well, I meant to see if there's any other audio diaries. Okay. That's what she's calling him.
Suchong? What the hell were you thinking? Drinkable plasmids? We're burning through 10 times the amount of atom compared to the injectables. And if you fail to notice, them sea slugs ain't exactly growing on trees. Switch back to the injectables and let the eggheads in marketing worry about selling it to the chumps.
Fontaine just said something that we learned before. For some reason, isn't Hink? Who is it? Who is it in BioShock Infinite? The one, Fink. Fink cut ties with Suchong. They shared notes all up into the part where they just mentioned in a previous one a little tiny clue that Suchong couldn't figure out imprinting, but Fink did figure it out. Now we're seeing that also Suchong was possibly trying to redo some of the things Fink had figured out, which was make it drinkable like in Infinite, but in Infinite they had a different way of being able to get plasmids. In this one they have the sea slugs. They don't have infinite amounts. He just said he uses 10 times as much to make a drinkable one. Let them shoot it up like junkies. So we've got a few issues already with Big Daddies. Unreliable, unstable, launching option to be removed from drills and future models. They don't want the launching option. Well, he wanted a launching option at first because remember, they're trying to trade notes, and now he's just kind of cut off at one point. So we're in a very, very different place where we are actually seeing the Suchong office, in which Suchong is still actively taking notes. Suchong is actively trying to figure out what Fink has done and vice versa. Imprinting solution not found in genetics. Remember, Suchong sees everything in genetics. Fink is seeing everything actually as more of a businessman. It's not all genetics. Is it pretty much what you can handle and what you can do, blah, blah, blah. There's the hair sample, so desperately needed by Suchong, though she could never reveal that she is the girl that Suchong saw in all the flashbacks. She couldn't give her own hair sample. She had to go back to Colombia and get a hair sample from the other girl, even though it's the same hair. Couldn't let him know. Otherwise, her leverage is gone. But now we're also seeing the Vita chambers. Ryan Industries, a combination of plasmids reconstructed with a field of quantum entanglement, resulting in fantastical restoration properties. I have fast-tracked this project for immediate mass production and distribution throughout Rapture. This completes stage 1. Note, all chambers must be tuned to Andrew Ryan's specific genetic frequency before proceeding with distribution. This was supposed to be for everyone, but Ryan decided to make it for himself after the revolution. Remember, it was his own way to save his own ass and to make sure that anyone that got close couldn't do the same. He could make an army, he could do all these other things, he can't be touched. Not if he's got all these things all around. So the same reason why I have to be here instead of letting anyone else. I am not tuned, and I am just kind of out of the loop for Andrew Ryan. Maybe I can get past the things that Fontaine cannot. So. But now we're also seeing this. There's an imprinting problem.
Alright. Let's see here what we could do.
Mr. Monster's scary. Stay away from him. He's scary.
Look, it's okay. He can't hurt anyone.
Scary.
Shh. Shh. Can you move? Can you just move a little bit for me? Don't. I don't know how to help you. I don't. No, he's just hurt. He just needs somebody to figure out how to fix him. Maybe there's some. I don't know. Is there some documentation for him around here or something? Right. Look who I'm asking.
Now you see, we're actually still seeing before imprinting, before Suchong figured it out. Now remember, we have to desperately remember that Fink cut ties with Suchong before he shared how imprinting works. But we are talking to somebody who actually now imprinted, had that damn bird imprint on her. It's the one thing he's failing at. And you see, they don't look like normal. They don't look like normal little sisters. They're not actually completely changed. They just have their faces painted at this point, because we've got Cohen somewhere probably that's got a hand in all of this stuff, since he's giving away all the kids, and he's a freak of nature about art and math and stuff like that. So these are normal little girls still. They haven't been able to figure it out. They've figured out how to put slugs in their stomachs. They figured out that they can harvest them. They haven't figured out how to protect them so they can mass distribute them and whatnot. Fontaine is trying to still figure that out with Suchong. Suchong's trying to figure out how to make these things and these things like each other. But I gotta go fix one now because he's blocking the door. He's blocking the way through. And we got a prototype stage 1 of one of these things sitting right here. Now I gotta go figure it all out. I have to figure it out myself. But no damn casualty. No genetic link. Remember, Fink didn't think about all genetics. Oops.
Encoded.
But we've run into one of these encoded ciphers.
Big Daddy will not imprint.
Mm-hmm.
If not imprint, what good is he to little sister? She no like him. He no like her. Situation is impasse. Unacceptable.
Remember, in a previous episode, she already figured out his cipher was his own name at the bottom of the page, being able to take the chemical formulas and actually use his own name as the cipher, which you can do as a grid. There's a few ways to do a cipher, blah, blah, blah. We could talk about ciphers all day. They're really fucking cool. But she's really good at ciphers, as we learned from the original BioShock Infinite. She likes puzzles. She likes all that because she's locked in a damn tower. She figured out the cipher was this guy because he's all into himself. So he's seeing that Suchong at this moment of time still doesn't know how to make this work. He does not know how to make them imprint. And Fink, he's out of the picture. Fink's we've already gotten indication that Fink doesn't want anything to do with this. So now I'm trying to remember what I do. Because like I said, I honestly don't remember all the controls. It's still locked right there. I don't remember exactly what all to do. I know that a dead body right behind a desk when he's trying to act normal is not good while there's a starting up a revolution. It's probably not the best thing. Alright. Oh yeah, that's right. I didn't have to go find anything. I'll explain what's about to happen because I think I can make this happen. Without? How do I... Or do I need to find... Because I know how this works, I just don't remember what I need to do. Like I said before, this is not one of the games that I haven't played before. I played both BioShock and BioShock Infinite, but I'm thanking you guys for joining me. As for the channel's sake, I actually played the remastered versions, and I never finished up the DLC. So, oh, note.
If stupid beasts had a half brain, they would realize they need little sister to live.
There we go.
Sisters secrete only kind of atom that is genetic match for them. No little sister. No big daddy.
That's the note I need to find. Suchong had figured something else out. In his method of doing things, instead of making the songbird, that there was an attachment made. That Elizabeth knows full well how the attachment was. In this version, when he created the Big Daddies, he created a different version because he had to get the slugs. He created this Big Daddy, something that couldn't be reversed, from the homeless shelter, but his note just said, this Big Daddy...
Scary, 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 scary.
I've got to do something.
This Big Daddy can't survive without them. That's what Suchong said. This Big Daddy's dumb and the girls are dumb. Big Daddy, they don't realize they've got the only thing that can save them, and the Big Daddies don't realize they need to protect the girls so they can stay healthy. It's a symbiotic relationship, not a parasitic. It's not one way.
Big monster sick.
It's okay. It's okay, please. I don't know how to help him. He needs Adam. I don't have any of that. I don't know what to
Monster's
do.
going to die. Not fair. We can help. Help.
Flying with the thorn in its paw.
This cannot be understated. This scene alone, if enough of what she was doing wasn't already screwing up timelines, this scene alone, right here, solidifies the events of BioShock. We'll get back to it, but remember in one of the earlier videos that we saw of what Suchong had of Columbia, Elizabeth was reminded of why Songbird even got attached to her. Songbird crashed through the window of her little tower, and she went to comfort Songbird. Songbird got attached not by genetics like Suchong thinks it has to happen, but because Songbird was there hurt, and Elizabeth went to comfort and save him. All of a sudden, it became symbiotic. Songbird was Elizabeth's only friend. So Elizabeth needed Songbird. Songbird saw her as the only thing worth protecting because she comforted him. That's how it was made. She just reproduced it right here. She reproduced it by having them comfort and help Big Daddy. And Big Daddy reaches out a hand to let them up on his shoulder as if to protect them. Now we have everything needed for BioShock to occur, don't we? Almost everything. Almost everything. We're missing one thing, aren't we? Well, actually, we're missing two because we got the voxophone in BioShock. We got the voxophone of Fontaine dying, or I mean Suchong dying. We got that voxophone, didn't we?
Clinical trial. Protector system. Plasmid completed. Dr. Suchong, client Ryan Industries. Very frustrating day. I can't seem to get the damn Big Daddies to imprint on the little brats. The protection bondage is just not forming. Get away. Maybe if I modify the genetic sequence to... sequence to allow for... Get away, you filthy little shit! What are you doing? Get back! Get back!
And there goes the rest of your bond. They helped him, and the second Suchong backhanded one of the little sisters.
There's the ace.
He got enraged and killed Suchong. We heard it in the first game. Now we saw it's because he didn't figure out the bond. Elizabeth did. Elizabeth, going back in the past, is the one that figured out how to make them bond.
This is it. This is the ace in the hole. All the pain and all of the death for this.
But it means everything, doesn't it? All the pain and all the death for that. Yes. Absolutely that. She's correct. All the pain and all the death. For that little slip of paper that, as you notice, the final... Oh yeah, I can't go back and check the other room. The final cipher that we haven't talked about here. The final one that we haven't discussed. The final one we haven't seen. Enter wall. Oh, do I need the wrench? I wish I could take the wrench. That'd be nice. The only... She saw a future. She sure did. But we're about to see something here too. She didn't decode the cipher for...
Hey, sister. Over here.
And she knows what she's walking into. She absolutely knows what she's walking into.
You have it.
I have it.
Give it over then. I'm keen to get this brat off me hands.
You know what? Andrew Ryan said I was a rube. But he was wrong. I'm not the rube, Atlas. You are. We both know what happens next. Just get it over with.
Well, love, if you insist.
But it's not fractured for her anymore. It's not fractured. She remembers this door. She remembers the one, the only one that led to Sally. She remembers.
What is this? It's just a bunch of gibberish. What does this say, you little whore? Hey! What does this say?
It says... Would you kindly...
We've got the activation phrase. Now all we've got to do is get that genetic freak of nature on an airplane and Rapture's ours.
Now she sees.
I chose Rapture.
Chooses. A slave obeys.
They say to save one life is to save the world entire. It is you who are their savior.
I can see all the doors. And what's behind all the doors. And behind one of them, incredibly, I see him.
Remember, the original BioShock had 2 endings.
Dans ses bras, elle me vole tout bas. Je vois la vie en rose. Il m'a dit des mots d'amour, des mots de tous les jours. Et ça me fait quelque chose.
Il est entré dans mon cœur une part de bonheur dont je connais la cause. C'est lui pour moi, moi pour lui dans la vie. Il me l'a dit, l'a juré pour la vie. Et dès que je l'aperçois,
Ooh. How to sum that up real fast? Well, first I turned down the volume of the singing in the background. I let this play off as I just quickly try to wrap up this stream so I finally have this finish for everyone who's been looking for the ending and possibly my analysis of it, because I do have an analysis of this game, and bear with me, it takes a second, of all of the games, because this DLC, unlike a lot of things, and this is exactly why I usually count out BioShock 2, because I believe BioShock and BioShock Infinite very well lead into each other, and 2 just kind of takes away from a little bit of the art, especially of this DLC, of what it was able to do, which most games screw up a lot. So here's what's going on. This is my opinion of things. Let's try to put this in a timeline and an order that really actually makes sense to everything that's happening here. So, we've got, in this world, a timeline that seems to have sprang out of nowhere and things like that, of why did it happen, how were they raised from the sea, how did Fontaine come back into power as Atlas, leading a rebellion, get to whatever, get to Would You Kindly, how did he know all these things? It sounded like it was Su Chong, but luckily enough, Levine, whether he thought about it or not, did not give away everything in the first game. If you try to get all of the recordings, you listen to everything, every single thing you can find, you still do not get how Atlas knew, how Fontaine knew about Would You Kindly.
You ready?
So,
See the pyramids along the Nile.
You can actually go at any time and see her do this cover. So I don't mind turning her down a little bit and saying what's going on, because I have to get through what my analysis of this really is. So, that's who plays Elizabeth and whatnot. So, they never really explain it, do they? Well, it's set in the future. So let's go back to the past. We finally have, in all these flashbacks in this, making up the past of what happened even in Infinite. And Infinite happens before BioShock. So what really happens in Infinite that really has an impact, and why does this really turn it all full circle? We have the impact of pretty much a Booker DeWitt who's looking to wipe away the debt by getting the girl. He goes to Colombia to get the girl, not realizing it's his own daughter he's pretty much saving. That when the version of Booker that gets baptized turns into Comstock, when he decides to do what he does with the Lutece device and try to fool around with it, he becomes sterile. He can't have kids, but he wants an heir. But he knows through the tears that there is a version of himself that never messed with the tears, that never messed with any of that stuff. And because there's a version of that, of him like that, he also knows there are many, many versions of him that had a child. He goes to steal that child. When he takes a child, that's what leads into BioShock Infinite, all of its events and whatnot, where you're actually going as the version that did not had the child stolen from, that he was like that. All right, so we go through the events of BioShock Infinite. Everything seems pretty straightforward. We come to the DLC. Finally, at the end of BioShock Infinite, we find out that the repressed power that her tower was keeping from her, that why it needed to be destroyed, why she could usually open tears and go wherever she wanted but couldn't anymore. It was siphoning her power. It was a giant siphon. With it being fully destroyed, finally, after controlling Songbird for a moment, having it destroyed, she had all of her powers. But Songbird starts coming after them at the very end of the other game, remember? When it comes after them, she goes, he's like, "It's about to get us," and she goes, "No, he's not." And she's just like, swipe at the finger, and all of a sudden, they're looking at it, they're underwater, and Songbird slams into the window. She has now full control of all the powers that had been siphoned away from her. She now can see back behind all the doors and tries to explain to Booker that actually we're looking at a multiverse, a huge one. That the stars in the sky weren't stars in the sky. They're actually all different possibilities of what could and could not happen. They are constants and variables. And one of the things that he doesn't really get his head around, but she can because she can see through all of them, is that one of the constants keeps being that there is a person, a city, a bond that's made between a person who's trying to capitalize and a person who's trying to create something to protect that capitalization. There's a leader, there's a downfall, there's a hero. There's all these kind of constants and variables, but it's varying in a few different more ways than even Booker can get his head around and Elizabeth can't explain. Elizabeth can't explain that one of the variables is actually time. So we keep thinking we're seeing all of these doors in the first game that are just different variations of what Booker and Elizabeth go through. And at the very end of the game, Elizabeth says that the one constant that keeps coming up, that we can stop it, smother him in the crib, is what Booker says. And Elizabeth says, "Are you sure you want to do that?" He goes, "Yes." And it's like, well, you're back at the baptism, because smothering him in the crib, there's only one way for Comstock to be made. The one way for Comstock to be made is that you get baptized. If you can never be baptized in the first place, Comstock cannot be made. You will smother him in the crib. What she did not really explain to Booker, which Comstock knew, let's not forget, Comstock knew this and Elizabeth knew this. Booker, the protagonist that you played at Infinite, did not know that one of the variables is time. It very much is time, and Booker never really got that around his head. He was switching in between different versions of the events he was playing through, but he never really had to switch too much through versions of events where time was manipulated. So he allows himself to be killed. But time is variable, and because time is one of the variables, the only variable that's not accounted for, there is a variable left unchecked. One variable, one simple variable that allows there to be a timeline, a time where Elizabeth has to be around to be able to stop the timelines, all the divergences of Comstock being created. That singular timeline of an Elizabeth who usurps time and space and can jump around means that there has to then be one other singular timeline where there is the idea, not necessarily timeline, let's take that out of the equation. There has to be another instance, another variable that was not taken into account by Elizabeth after drowning him. There is a variable, one instance, one stemming point in which that cannot occur. Her own death. Her own death cannot occur at that river. Otherwise, she cannot even drown Comstock in the beginning. While there are many Elizabeths there to do it, only one of them still survives at the end of the game. And that is the one that you play as the whole game. That's the one that is in this game. She has the memories of every other one because she sees through all the doors. Every Elizabeth that helps drown Comstock / Booker at the very end of Infinite has seen through all the doors. They all know. They all know what's gonna happen. And what's really about to happen is that there will be one Elizabeth left, which means there has to be one Booker left, which means there has to be one Comstock left, and there has to be one Anna left. When all of those are left, she figures out the events of what has to happen here. In these events, now that we finally got through this, that I waited. There. Your last little hint that we just started the events of BioShock. That was it. That was the last little hint that we started the events of BioShock. The tail of the plane falling down towards BioShock. When she accounted for all of that, she looked through all the doors one more time and found it. She found the instance, and it was a really screwed up instance. She tried to stop it in a different way. The way she tried to stop it, the way she really tried to, was to convince Comstock not to do it in the first place. Remember, she can see all the instances, see through all the doors. That doesn't mean necessarily she will always pick the right door or make always the right choice. She just sees all the choices she could make. The choice she made was to try to stop Comstock. While she saw all the different ways that could have gone, the way that it ended up going for her, because there was only one chance. Remember, she's put herself in a position that there is only one chance for things to happen again. There are no more divergences. Whatever choice and whatever happens with that Comstock, with that Anna, with that Booker, it's done. The rest of them have already been dealt with in Infinite. She made a choice knowing that different paths could happen, but only one true path would happen because we are at the end. Do you see that? She saw there were separate doors in separate ways, yet there could only actually be one way that it went. Elizabeth stood on the other side of that portal trying to tell Comstock, that's not your daughter, let her go. If she had let that happen, everything unravels. Booker gets his daughter. Comstock never gets what he wants. Possibly that Elizabeth disappears. The one that has to grow up to do all the drowning and whatnot. Maybe she makes a timeline in which all of this didn't quite play out, does it? It plays out as there is a man with a daughter. It plays out with a man that also had a baptism and couldn't have a child. Didn't have the choice, or when he had the chance to get the daughter, he failed. It plays out as a timeline in her mind that if she succeeds in this one way it could go, she solves everything. But just like she was challenged in this game of knowing that there are multiple ways, but she thinks she's being led to slaughter, her choice was wrong. There could only be one outcome, and that outcome was that Anna got killed, decapitated, because of her own intervention. Now she's got two reasons to go after Comstock. Comstock wouldn't listen to her, and now Comstock killed the last Anna, leaving the last Booker without a daughter. Not only without a daughter, but the version of Booker who also gambled, who also tried to get to sell his own daughter, who also had regret, who tried to get her back desperately, and instead of just losing her through a portal, through a rip in time and space, through a tear, he had his daughter decapitated in front of him. We don't even get to talk about that, nor do we ever get to see that actually play out. There is now a timeline that Booker has to bury his child. There is a second timeline made. There's a second one made, but it's all the same continuance, in which the last Comstock says, fuck. He turns to Luteces and said, send me somewhere where I will never remember this again. Knowing that when you cross over, when you rip through these tears into places you should never be, or where you don't belong, which he realized it wasn't just about, Booker being able to switch. Booker could switch in between all these timelines that he didn't, because he was actually switching in between places that he actually did belong. Another version of him belonged. He did not belong in Columbia, though, as he was. Comstock was already there. That's why Booker loses his memory of why he's originally there in the first Infinite. He loses his memory of it. He loses his memory of it because there is already a Booker that belongs there, and he doesn't. But when he's switching with Elizabeth through all the tears, he belongs in every single one of those realities, just as one that did something a little different. It's not the same mind wipe. So, he is sent somewhere. Booker doesn't know that this is how it works, but that one variable of time is one of the ones that can completely screw up your mind. And when the Luteces took him somewhere, they actually had to take him to a time where he wasn't skipping anymore. They had to one time take him to that timeline, but then from then on out, he did belong in all the different variations of that timeline. See? So when they're going through the tears, Booker doesn't lose his memory like he sees all the ghosts and apparitions of the people who know they died but didn't die. They're confused. Their noses are bleeding. Why isn't Booker's nose bleeding? It doesn't have to. He was already pushed through time to get to Columbia at the time he was needed, when another Booker did exist in that time. Now, we're finally getting through to the reason why that's all important, because now that Comstock asked to go to a place where he could forget, the only true way he could forget is not amnesia or just trying to forget. It's literally he has to pass through time to a place where it's not interchangeable. There's no interchanging him for another version of him. It meant he had to go somewhere where he's never been before and cannot go again because of the Luteces' interference. There's no place for him in Rapture. A variable and a difference that they could send him to, because it is a constant and variable game. It's a multiverse. What the Luteces and Elizabeth can see in that multiverse is that some of those towers are just a different time in which the same events occur, but under the sea with Andrew Ryan 30 years in the future. However, Columbia's is about 30 years in the past, 20 years technically, somewhere in between there, depending on what part of the time you're talking about. So, the Luteces did the one thing he asked. Sent him through time and legitimately made him forget. That's why in episode 1 of Burial Under the Sea, he gets time screwed up. He can't answer the simple question of when did you come here or what year is it? When he had a calendar on his desk, it should have been obvious. But he says 51, no 49. It was definitely 49. He honestly doesn't know. He only gets flashbacks of ever being Comstock. He only ever gets flashbacks of being Comstock. He thinks he truly is Booker. He went to a place where his amnesia let him try to forget everything that he had done. Elizabeth tracks him down, finds that this Booker, not knowing he was ever Comstock, adopted a daughter, not ever knowing that there was a version of him that wanted a daughter, and repeats the same mistake that the Booker that's now having to bury his headless daughter, he makes the same mistake with an adopted daughter. He makes his mistake with an adopted daughter, where he goes off, he's gambling, loses track, and all of a sudden she's gone. Fontaine's orphanage, pretty much, Cohen goes off and is abducting girls sometimes when they don't have enough of them. So, he turns his back for 2 seconds while gambling, and he loses her. Like father, like daughter, too much. There's too many times the apple is not falling far from the tree. She sees he makes that same mistake and sees that it could be the way to jog his memory into remembering who he really was. So she led him on purpose to a place where he would be put in a timeline in which Sally would have to be saved. Sally would have to be tugged on from event. Sally would be an event and needing to be saved while he was having to tug on her, while holding a figurine in his head of a headless girl, not knowing ever why that he's attached to this headless figurine, trying to coax Sally out of the hole. He's attached to it because it's a memory he doesn't quite understand, a fragment of his past that he's forgotten. The head he had to see of Anna lying on the ground. He's attached to this, and Sally is too, of this little doll. So all of a sudden, when he's tugging on Sally, saying, "Come over here," he has the flashback that reminds him, that he tried to steal Anna from Booker and only got her killed. Elizabeth was staring him down. So he drops the bobblehead and says, "Elizabeth, girl, I am so sorry." And that is when Elizabeth goes completely cold-eyed and said, "No, you're not, but you're about to be." And in episode 1, the last Comstock gets drilled through. Now we're to the next part. This is the timeline. This is the actual how the timeline of events really goes here. Because we just took care of BioShock Infinite first. It was taken care of first. Now we're in the timeline of finally getting to the point where she had gone back to punish Comstock, but she was there right before Rapture fell to hell, and Fontaine had already been sunken, or Atlas, whatever. His everything sunken down, fathoms below, because he's a parasite as far as Andrew Ryan is concerned. She sees, after she gets her revenge, sorrow for what she's done. Just like Booker saw, he had sorrow for what he had done for giving up Anna in the first place to repay his debts. For her to make peace and feel like she's repaying her debt of getting rid of Comstocks, she made a sacrifice of a child. Just like Booker had made a sacrifice of a child to get rid of his own penance and debt. She realized she made the same mistake her own dad made. The Booker dad made. So she is compelled and forced to go back and see, while still seeing behind the door, seeing a solution to being able to save Sally. It's on her shoulders. She did her dad's own mistake and killed a girl. But the Luteces have to take her back because she cannot go back to a place she's died. And the Luteces warn that maybe you shouldn't do this. But the Luteces are warning even more than that. Maybe the Luteces are warning, you shouldn't have fucked with time in the first place. Because in all of this time of messing with the timeline, the Luteces have been doing it pretty strategically. They're the ones that convinced the uprising to happen, because Fink's boy is spared because Elizabeth has to get blood on her hands when Fink's little boy was never going to be killed by, and I forget her name, the leader of the rebellion over in, that was the slave that started the uprising. Forgot her name for 1 second, and I swear I'd remember it if I had just been fresh with the game and whatnot. She's seeing all these flashbacks of the Luteces screwing with things and even making a future that was suitable for them and whatnot. She's starting to ponder even whether she ever had a choice. Which brings up the idea, do we actually even have a choice? Knowing behind all the doors, if we had all the infinite knowledge in the world, that boat ride really does bring up the question, did we ever even have a choice? Even if we were like gods, did we truly ever have a choice? Because even as like a god, she simplified all the choices down to one timeline when it was an infinite number. As a god, does she even have a choice for the events that she's created? And the Luteces are making her aware of that. That not only is she going back to being slaughtered to save a girl, one girl, and make a whole new timeline in a different place and time, but what is she really doing by manipulating place and time in the first place, trying to go back and kill all the Comstocks in the first place? Why not let those Comstocks live? Is vengeance really that important? Like father, like daughter. She does it anyway, but she knows she's going to lose her memory. Smart money would have been to have put a note in her pocket or something, but she's too hasty. She's not listening to advice. She goes ahead. She goes back to the place that she's already died. Into this world, into the world of BioShock, of Rapture, where she wakes up next to the dead body of the last Comstock, with gray hair, if he had a beard, would look like Comstock. Where Atlas now is wondering about, she's about to be killed by Russian roulette, and says that she can do all these things for him and get his imprisonment reversed. All of it because she only has one set of things she can do to save Sally. She's put herself into a corner. While she can see all of the choices, she gave herself only 2 now that there's only one of Elizabeth, and one of the Elizabeths died in that. If she wants to save Sally, she has to go back and create one version of events. Or she could forget about Sally and let it splinter off into many, all of them not leading to BioShock ever happening. The events of BioShock never happen if she turns her back on Sally, but she can't let herself live with the idea that she punished the last Comstock by letting Sally die. So, because of that, she makes the choice to lose her memory, go back, and try to save that Sally. What she doesn't remember in losing her memory is that she knows she is creating the events of Rapture. She knows she's doing it. She is the reason Rapture existed, but all she wants to do is save a little girl. So, she goes down there. She has fragments of her memory of the different timelines that can happen, but there's only one timeline that has to happen. She's now made it to where, again, just like she did it with drowning Booker, she made it to where there has to be only now one semblance of a timeline where everything is splinter off now. And her actions, by the end of it, there's no other version of her in any other multiverse to do this. When she dies then with Sally, now we have multiple ways for everything to go. That's how the original BioShock can have 2 endings, where either Jack can be the new ruler of Rapture, or he can go to the surface and save the girls. And that's why it is mentioned in all of that she saw all the futures. At the very end, she mentioned, I saw all the futures, I saw all the doors, and I saw the possibility that him, and she's speaking of Jack, she was looking in the mirror in the cockpit of the airplane that she knew she was going to end up being responsible for one getting crashed. The reason why the ace in the hole gets there in the first place is all Elizabeth. Elizabeth is the one that made it so little sisters and big daddies can function together. Suchong and Fink cut communications because Fink got what he needed, and Suchong was being a leech and a pest to him. He didn't need him anymore. Fink is a businessman. It's bad business to waste your time on somebody who is of no asset or value to you anymore. Fink found the way to make the connection he needed to, and the way he made the connection was by accident. Songbird getting hurt and Elizabeth going to him. Suchong couldn't see emotional connections. He only saw DNA and empirical facts, not subjective emotions. Especially in things that were created like machines. When the connection is broken, Suchong doesn't have a way to make little sisters and big daddies interact. Elizabeth is the one that comes up with it. Elizabeth does it. Elizabeth starts a chain of events where even with Suchong dead, there are other little sisters now telling other little sisters that big daddies are okay. Heal them, help them with your atom, they'll protect you. All of a sudden now it's out of her hands. She created this whole system where they're actually connected. It's a symbiotic relationship because of her own experience. She now created the singular timeline of where that can happen. She also created the singular timeline where BioShock has to start where it starts, with the imprisonment of Atlas being reversed by the Lutece particle raising it back up. Without Elizabeth going back to Columbia to get a Lutece particle to get the imprisonment back up in the first place, Atlas Fontaine never gets back up into the rest of Rapture and does what he does. Maybe Rapture still falls apart in a different way, but not because of Fontaine/Atlas. Not that way. That's not how it happens. And then Elizabeth, finally in all of this, gives him the key. And it makes her realize what she's really done. She's about to have to live with the fragment of reality. She made sense of the fragment of reality that she'd forgotten. The fragment of reality that she'd forgotten the whole time was that if she went back to save Sally, she made a timeline, one singular timeline that now everything else can splinter off from, in which there never had to be that New Year's Eve right before everything went to hell. There never had to be a time where Fontaine or Atlas gets their way back to Rapture and causes just all hell to break loose. There never had to be a time where all of this... There never had to be an ace in the hole to come back. There never had to be a symbiotic relationship between little sisters and big daddies. There never had to be more girl sacrifice for this to happen. More big daddies created. There never had to be all of these things. She finally, getting Su Chong's note of "Would you kindly," remembers her flashback when she's looking into a mirror, a fragmented mirror. The fragments of what she is, her memory, her combined memory of all the ways she could be. That's why the mirror breaks and shatters. She's shattered in two ways. All the ways it could have been, and all the ways she shattered inside of the way it will be, because she made a choice. She painted herself in a corner. She is broken over all the ways things could have been, yet she chose the one way it now had to be, because there was only one Elizabeth left, and no more interloper between different dimensions, between time and space. One singular Elizabeth choosing to create the events of BioShock and Rapture to save one little girl, because behind one of the doors in that future, where she sacrifices herself and makes sure that Rapture has to exist, in those doors, she sees behind some of them, Jack does not become a dictator ruler to take over for Andrew Ryan or for Fontaine. He becomes the one to save Sally. She doesn't get to save Sally. She has to depend on that she's making a future where Sally is saved by the man who she has to tell him, "Would you kindly?" If she doesn't tell him the key phrase to make Jack do what he does, "Would you kindly?" If he doesn't tell her that phrase, he couldn't hijack the ship. He couldn't be controlled by Fontaine. He couldn't be controlled by Andrew Ryan. He could be controlled by Andrew Ryan. Andrew Ryan made the phrase. But he couldn't be controlled. Didn't have to have all these things. None of those events had to happen, which means Sally still doesn't get saved. She has to, in her dying breaths, tell Atlas that the cipher means "would you kindly." The key phrase is "would you kindly." She has to tell him that for Sally to be saved in some timelines, which goes back to why the Lutesses said, "Why are you even doing this? And why did you do what you did in the first place?" Because now we see it come full circle two different ways. We see it come full circle in two different ways. And this is where I'm going to finish my whole analysis of both of the games kind of wrapped up. We see it come full circle in the fact that, well, three ways. One, that the daughter follows the cycle of the father. The daughter follows the cycle. She continues on with her dad's legacy, both Booker and Comstock. Both the heartlessness and the wanting redemption. The heartlessness of Comstock and the redemption of Booker. She carries on both of them. Selfishly, in many cases, like Comstock. Selflessly, like Booker for being drowned. She carries on her father's legacy in both ways. But she brings it round circle because she makes the events unfurl like the way they do. She makes that rapture. But at the same time, she didn't realize what the Lutesses were trying to drill into her brain because she was so racked with guilt. She spent all of this time killing all of the Comstocks to erase a tragedy. She spends all of this time to erase a tragedy of Comstock being able to create this awful Columbia, this society. She stops the timeline of him being able to make a successor, a seed, a daughter, Columbia, the way Comstock. She gets rid of all the Comstocks. But what does she do? She makes it so this can't happen. This can't happen except for in one set. Columbia does exist. So the real timelines that she made solidified is that there is a fragmenting timeline where Booker has a dead daughter in his arms with no head he has to bury. That Booker could go on living, that Booker could get drunk, that Booker could gamble, that Booker could commit suicide. She makes all of these timelines that could be happy or tragic. All of them are going to start tragic because he's holding his dead daughter. It's solidified. One Booker, one dead Anna. No other exceptions to it. She solidifies the timeline that there is one Columbia. Only one Columbia, but it has to fragment off of the idea that that Columbia's leader is gone. So anything Columbia now becomes is now not under the leadership of Comstock. He leaves. So there's now splintering timelines of maybe Columbia becomes still polarized because he was preaching pretty much racism up the ass. She creates all these new timelines of shit going wrong. But in her blindness of trying to create one mistake, she creates all these other timelines that are just as big of mistakes. And then she makes a mistake trying to get rid of the last Comstock to finish what she started. And she does the same damn mistake. She makes the same damn mistake, which is she goes back and creates again only one set of circumstances that can happen, where by going and saving Sally, there can't be other Elizabeths, there can't be other timelines, there can't be other what ifs. There has to now be a BioShock. She isn't an interloper. She has no other dimensions to belong to. She's killed all other iterations, and she should return to a timeline where she doesn't belong. So now she creates a new timeline where there's a Rapture that can now have splintering timelines just as tragic as Columbia. That's the ridiculous part of all this. The second way that it comes full circle, not just by her maintaining the timeline of how does BioShock 1 happen, but by the fact that her doing that makes a splintered reality for Rapture, where tragedy strikes there now at a scale that it struck Columbia. And tragedy strikes in a way that there could be a Rapture, and where its savior could be its tyrant. She makes a Rapture where now you can choose to save the little sisters and bring them to the surface and save Sally, like the future she knows is behind one of the doors. She also realizes that behind other doors, Sally dies, or is harvested, or is kept under the thumb of a tyrannical Jack. So what did she do? The Luteces tried to tell her. What did she really do in everything she meddled with? Which is why the Luteces are saying, do you actually even have free choice? You fix those other timelines. Sure, you got rid of Columbia the way it was. You got rid of all these Booker and all these Comstock clones and whatnot. You made a singular set of circumstances and whatnot. But now you just made a timeline where there is now so many splintering offs of so many tragedies. She solved one timeline and made the same amount of tragedy in another. So, what did she really accomplish? Yes, I saw someone in the comments that I will say Darla in particular. Darla completely disagree because of only one thing. There's only one Elizabeth that survives. At the very end of BioShock Infinite, you see Booker go for his daughter. In the whole timeline, if you're actually going to go with the multiverse theory, if there's only one Elizabeth, heretofore, by BioShock's own laws it created, there could only ever be, as Elizabeth discovered, one other set of everyone else for her to have existed, and she goes to find it. There could only be one other Booker in a timeline, there could be only one other Anna in a timeline, and there could only be one other Comstock. Yes, Booker did get his daughter Anna back. You know what he immediately did? He went and gambled. He went off and gambled, tried to repay the debt, and did the same damn thing that played all to this, which meant that he played to the one that gets Anna's head cut off. So now, the new constant and variable, what did she really do? She made the new constant and variable stem from there being a set timeline that it stems from, where Booker has a dead Anna. A set timeline where Columbia no longer has its leader. A set timeline where the last Comstock is dead, but Sally has to be saved or forgotten about. And if she's forgotten about, BioShock never has to happen. But she creates one more set timeline where, since there cannot be another variable of time of her existing anywhere else, since she quantumly collapsed herself down into one singularity, since she collapsed herself down by returning to somewhere where she already passed away, there's only one set timeline, which is why she's scared shitless. She's scared shitless about, if she fucks it up, if she screws this up, she only gets one chance to make a set of circumstances where Sally can live. But she knows in all of the ways she's seen it be able to go, she probably dies. She was right about the death part. She forgot that the omnipotent her that could see all the doors also saw that in her rashness. She says all of this tragedy, all of this bloodshed, she just said it, all of it over this. She immediately regrets going to save Sally, and at the same time is happy she did it. She made penance, but she also regrets immediately that she knows what she just did. She remembers what she did. In her emotional hurtness, she now created a new set of circumstances where now it's splintered off from the moment where she... What it really comes down to is that, do they really have free will? Well, it seems like Elizabeth and the Luteces should have the most free will. They actually have the least. Because they can do what they do, the effects they cause are the ones that predetermine so many other people that once they either step in or step out of a place that they do not belong, they have forced a certain set of circumstances. They forced it onto other people and sometimes themselves, especially in the case of when she goes back to where she does not belong. Something the Luteces refused to do because they knew the consequences. She had been forcing other realities to play out their hands. Now she forced the one reality where there's only one Elizabeth. So therefore, there's only one Booker with only one dead daughter, one Comstock that's now finally dead, one Elizabeth that got collapsed down into one singularity, that dies to save one Sally, who now splinters off into a timeline of, does Sally live or die based on Jack's choices in the first game? Thank you for watching. So glad you guys could join me. I'm going to do another live stream. Probably about right now. I can discuss it more in detail if anyone doesn't agree with how I put it together. But you know what? This isn't something I haphazardly came across. And I definitely made notes many times over a year ago to try to put it together so I could have this talk before. I didn't even find those notes, but it was really easy for me to remember once I was starting to remember that I was at the very end and I put it together and this, that, and the other. So, thank you for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. And hope to see you back here for the next one really soon. Bye!